a couple weeks ago when I met. You were talking about Ophiuchus, like you were trying to do some research or ask some questions, and that piqued my interest. And I was wondering what you were, what line of thought you were going down.
Oh, for Ophiuchus, what
Yeah,
was I? What was I getting into with Ophiuchus? Because I have issues with it. Um,
I don't remember. I just remember you posted something on Facebook, and I was like, um, I don't remember. Jeez, it was you post a lot, so you may have to go
no,
back a long
it
time.
makes sense.
And then I said
Yeah,
I something about it was the opposite
Um,
because the snake. I think you were saying like the snake was poisoning something, and I was like, actually, with
is
Ophiuchus,
the snake? Is the Garden of Eden snake Ophiuchus? That
right?
was it.
Okay, okay,
So what did that spring
interesting.
off in your mind?
Well, I think you were saying that it was something like a negative, and I was saying the Greek thought and the Roman thought about this was that Ophiuchus was actually the giver of medicine. So
Mhm.
basically, it taught Ophiuchus how to heal, and it gave it certain magic to heal Orion.
Right,
So it's almost like the stealing fire from the gods, Prometheus,
right.
because Ophiuchus went against the gods' wishes and went to the snake, just like the Garden of Eden.
You
He
know
went.
when you dive into sidereal astrology,
Hmm.
like Virgo's a month and a half. You know that I think Scorpio's only 6 days. Do you know how big Ophiuchus is?
Well, it's definitely bigger than both of those.
It's not that big. It's
No.
really not. It's really not. For all the crazy nonsense that they want to talk about it back and forth, tropical, sidereal, it's
Yeah.
not a big constellation. It just doesn't. It's the ecliptic. It doesn't. We don't go around it.
Well, it just basically it touches the foot as it passes over Scorpius. So it just touches the foot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm not an astrologer. That's I need to learn more about it. So I don't really get into any of the astrology aspects of it. I
Well,
just kind of
that reminded me of one thing where you're talking about touching the foot. It's
yeah.
that parable in the Bible that said the serpent will bite the horse's heel and the rider will fall off.
Hmm.
Right? The serpent is Ophiuchus facing Sagittarius, so it's just going to bite the heel of the horse, and then the rider will fall off. But the
Yeah,
thing is that when they're talking about serpents, I get confused sometimes because there's another serpent that falls into the timeline of my work, and it was Hydra, the
yeah,
sea serpent. So there's two different types of serpents. So when we're talking about a serpent, I want to make sure. That's why I was trying to jog everyone's memory and like, who does anybody have any more on this?
and
The serpent. So
yes, and it's interesting because it takes me back to the biblical tale of the brazen serpent raising the serpent on the pole, and it's the same kind of theme, which is as they walk through the desert, the serpent is known to bite the ankles or bite the
mhm,
feet of the Israelites crossing the
mhm,
desert. And then if you
mhm.
look up on the pole and look at the brazen serpent, then you will be healed. And it's the same
Which
type of.
is the same thing as rod of Asclepius. It's the caduceus. It's the kundalini. It's the same symbol.
But what is the pole? Okay, this is where the iconography really.
Well, actually, they say set it on a. They said set it upon a standard was the word that they used. I just
Hmm.
assumed it was like a post or a pole.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a depicted as a pole as well, and or a staff in the air. And when you're speaking of that, you're speaking of the Access Monday. You're speaking of the northern um, ecliptic, or the northern hemisphere of the sky.
Mhm.
So there's another serpent that a lot of people miss, which is Draco. It's a dragon, yes, but it's also a serpent. And in my research, um, I tend to see that the Urius serpent, which is the crown of the pharaohs, what is given to the pharaohs on their crown, that serpent on their forehead, which is the mark of being basically a demigod or joining the gods. And they say that the serpent is the ruler of the lower world, which is Earth. But when you're looking at it from the pyramid texts, it talks about when the pharaoh dies, he goes to the imperishable stars, which is the northern stars that never die. So this is the throne of God, the temple of God, because all year round you have the stars around the pole star, which was Draco back then, Thuban, and it moved to Polaris over a couple thousand years. But
We
what
actually
it's
have evidence of this. We have evidence of this because the pole star in old literature, I think they said it was red and now it's blue, or it was blue and now it's red. I forget which one exactly it was, but there's plenty of evidence supporting that our pole star shifted.
Oh yeah, because of the wobble of the Earth over its about close to 26,000 year precession, it moves. Well, this, it moves 1 degree every 72 years.
Right.
So that's how we get this precession. But when we're talking about the serpents on the pole, from what I see or from what I understand, is that the pole is literally the North Star. It's the throne of heaven, and this is why it's the crown. This is why you have the kippah. It's the throne of heaven is above you because it's this northern stars that never go below the ecliptic. So
that's what the yarmulke is for the Jews. Is it's a separation between you and God. Don't forget that you are separate from God. That's what it is, and it's stupid, but that's what it is.
So when they say, look up, like it literally says, like, look up at the serpent on the pole and you will be healed of the venomous snake bites. Because remember, we're talking about the foot. Okay, so they're two completely different areas. You have your soles on the ground, your feet, and that's what's being bitten by the serpent that kills, or the serpent that poisons. But if you look up, that's the serpent that heals, or the serpent that saves. So you have a savior serpent and a serpent that kills you. And I really believe that serpent that saves you back then in this kind of philosophy is Draco, because you have to look up at the northern sky. It's the northern star, and if you look at the northern, not the pole star, but the actual northern sky, the actual North Pole, that is right in the center in Draco, where its head is. Not where its head is, like where the body is, but it kind of wraps around the center point. That is the center of the actual sky from our perspective. And so if you're staring at it and watching that center point, that serpent is eternally moving around the center of the northern sky. So, when you see like the serpent from Eden and it's, coiled up this pole, to me, it fits perfectly in this idea of the symbology of the northern sky. And that's why, you call your head the crown, the temple, the kippah. It's all above you. This northern sky is a very sacred point. And this is where, in the pyramid texts, that is the destination of the pharaoh. The pharaoh has to reach the northern sky to sit on the throne, and then he's eternally part of the gods, who never dies, who's always above.
Yeah, it says serpents, skyworms, dragons, etc. are all descriptions of plasma. The Ouroboros is the aurora borealis. What do you think about that?
I think that symbolically we can also use the symbology of a serpent for those things. But in the ancient text, it literally tells you that the serpents are the northern sky. It literally tells you that the serpents are these constellations. So it's not just like a guess or, a hypothesis. I mean, this is what they're actually telling us.
Beautiful. Okay. So yeah, no, that's what we started off talking right before we started up. So what have you been getting yourself into since we last spoke?
Well, I think that the last show I did with you was about my latest book, which was The Gates of the
Mhm.
Anunnaki.
Mhm.
And, I wrote this book based on the sacred geometry aspect of it. The book before that, which was Astral Genesis, was heavily focused on the cycles of the sun and the stars. And then in The Gates of the Anunnaki, it did touch on that, but it mainly focused around these number systems, which was the Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian numbers, which we still use today, the base 60 model.
Mhm.
Basically, everything's divided in very specific ways, and we still use that system today. But I made some interesting connections after, which is really interesting. Um, Basically, I started to look back at the symbology and how it's related to the stars again. And I know that's what you really look into as well, and you've decoded a lot of things, especially with the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Mhm.
I think you did a whole show on that.
Mhm.
And I started to look at it again, and I started to realize that you have these two characters. You have Gilgamesh, who is a demigod, 2/3 god, 1/3 human. So he's mortal, he's going to die. And he's the exact description as the biblical Nephilim, which are the giants. What I found really interesting is that there's a lot of historical evidence that refer to the Nephilim and the giants as the constellation of Orion. So
Really?
so there is a definite connection. Hold on, I'll pull up the actual quotes so I can actually um, tell you exactly where it says this, if I can find it. But I'll get to that in a second. So you have Orion, and if you look in the sky where the sun goes, um, where does the sun pass closest to Orion? It goes through Gemini and Taurus.
Orion is between Gemini and Taurus, right?
Right, right. So,
So that would be like what, 8 to 10 a.m. or something, give
and
or take.
and like the arm. So you have the arm of Orion. It's like reaching up, like he's holding the club or the sword. And so it's like the arm of Orion is up into that Milky Way, and then right above that arm is basically like call it the foot of Gemini. All right. So that's how close it is. Now, Gemini, we have the stories of the hero twins, for example, or the mountains going back. And on the opposite end, or the opposing sign of Gemini, is Sagittarius. And Sagittarius, who is Sagittarius? Sagittarius is what we would call the beast man, right? It's the half man, half beast. Well, who is the twin and exact equal to Gilgamesh? It is Enkidu, who is the beast man.
Hmm.
So when you're looking at it in that perspective, astrologically, you're seeing um, an exact opposition between Orion, Gemini, and Sagittarius, the beast man.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. So I started to break down the Epic of Gilgamesh even more um, astrologically, and it just started to really get interesting because there's so much astrological myths within that epic um, that we still use that kind of symbology today in astrology or the
Mhm.
archetypes. But I don't know. Did you notice that one about Enkidu and Gilgamesh?
No, I didn't pick up on that.
Okay.
I also read ancient holy texts differently than normal people do. But no, go on, please.
Okay. Another really interesting thing that I started to notice was that you have these seals, and maybe I'll throw these up on the screen so people will understand. Let me just get the right slide. All right, I'm going to share this. And I have way too many things open on my computer. Let me see what this is called. Sorry for the delay. I know this is all live.
It's okay, we're used to it. Jeeps is here. Hey, Jeeps.
All right, that's not
Got it.
Okay, that's not it. That's it. All right. So you have the seal of Adad. Oh, which is this? Okay, never mind. That's a PDF I had up. See, I'm even showing the wrong thing. Okay, but it doesn't matter. When you're looking at this type of symbology, people look at the Anunnaki and the gods, and they're trying to figure this out. But there's a lot of evidence that point to the god Enki, the god of water, as being the actual constellation of Aquarius. And when you look at it in the sky, it's actually Pisces and Aquarius. He has the fish, he has the water symbols. And so this is like a map of the seasons. And you see this a lot in ancient artwork, especially from Sumeria, Acadia, Babylon. And what you'll see is the two mounds of creation in the center, these two hills. And in the center, you have Shemesh, which is the god of the sun. And you can see that he has this heat coming off of him, these heat waves. So he's very hot. He's the sun, and he's holding this knife. And this is really important. And then you have Virgo, which is Ishtar. And what is she holding in her hand? It's the shaft of wheat or the shaft of barley. So it's the same symbols that we still see today of Virgo, which is the virgin, the maiden, holding the wheat, basically. And she's standing next to the tree of life. But you can see Shemesh is there coming out of the ground between the two mounds, and he's holding her foot because he's the summer solstice, and he's going to now cut down Virgo. He's going to cut down all the vegetation, the harvest. So this is very symbolic. And then you have on the opposite end, you have the Pisces Aquarius, you have Aquila, and he's stepping over Capricorn, which again is the winter solstice. And this is where the wet season comes in. And this is why he's so big, because he's stepping over Capricorn. He is the wet season, bringing water, which will grow the plants, and then Shamash is going to cut it down. And what's really interesting about this iconography, so just remember that we have these two mounds, and we have the sun coming out in the middle. So we call this, let's say, the setting sun of, or the rising sun of summer solstice, which is Shemesh. All right. It's the same in Egypt. You have the two mounds, which is Khufu and Khafre, and the sun rises between it, or sets during summer solstice between it. And I don't want to go there. You have the sun rising between the two mounds in Babylon. Again, that's Enki or Shemesh. They don't know exactly which one that is. But what was a really, really interesting find was out in Utah, which is the Fremont petroglyphs. And you can see that during the morning of summer solstice, you have this kind of V-shaped hat and this petroglyph of the shaman. And only on the sunrise of summer solstice there's a shadow of the cliffs across it, and it will give the shadow of the two mounds with the sun. So it's exactly the same iconography, exactly the same symbology at the exact same time of the year, from Samaria to Mesopotamia to Egypt to Utah, and it's also exactly the same in Peru. So my whole thing, or my whole discovery, and that's the reason why I'm writing all these books and coming on these shows, is because nobody has caught on to this very specific symbology of the sun. Um, because everybody says everybody is separate. Thousands of years ago, nobody had contact or anything like this. But there is no way that cultures from around the world, going back 5,000-6,000 years at least, all did the exact same thing using the exact same logos to
Hmm.
explain the exact same thing. So how, just like I'm talking to you, like, how does somebody um, pass information or get information all around the world? And there's only two answers to this. One is all these people, all these societies, they come from one common heritage or one common knowledge. And that knowledge has been passed down through all generations. Or you have this theory of the world teacher, like the theory of Hermes or Thoth, who traveled the entire planet teaching all the communities around the world all the secrets. So is there evidence that there's a world teacher? I don't know. Is there evidence of a world heritage? I don't know. All I can say is just this fact alone, that we can find the same knowledge, the same logos, the same.
They do the same thing with the pine cone, Quetzalcoatl, the Vatican, all this
Mhm.
stuff. You know what I think it is, Jason?
What's
I've
that?
shared this with some people before. You ever see an overlay of the energy grid over the world?
You were talking about the ley lines.
The ley lines, yeah, 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 and how all these super important monoliths were built on them.
Yes.
I think they actually used to use that as Wi-Fi. I think they actually knew how to control how to send information via that super highway.
Hmm.
I
That
think
would
that's what they used to be able to do.
that would be really interesting. And a lot of people see that there is lineups of very sacred sites around the world. So there was a type of connection. And see, and I was just showing an example here of you have this site in Peru where they actually carved the top of a mountain to make a calendar. So you have these 13 mounds, and basically the sunset or the sunrise will tell you the solstice and the equinox. And then you have a very similar image from a petroglyph in Sweden, which shows these mounds and the sun rising above it. And you have this dude here who's very happy about this, you know. But archaeologists or anthropologists or whoever these are, basically they looked at this and they said, this is clearly a man running from a snake. So this is what the petroglyph is called. It's called a man running from a snake. you know.
Mm.
But if you know about the equinox, where the sun is in this picture, it's all about the spring. And what's the spring?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the
Great
symbology?
equinox, yeah.
It's
The
about
resurrection.
the resurrection and what's being resurrected here.
All our crops, food.
Exactly. Exactly. So it becomes so obvious to certain people, but then when it comes to the academics, it's almost like they have this blind spot where they can't, they don't know this stuff. How can they know this stuff? Um, and so I'm just out here just trying to make it as simple and in your face as possible, with evidence, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that. Sorry about
Okay.
wrong button. Wrong button. Um, so that's where I've been going with that. And yes, Gilgamesh holds the lion under the left arm. Yes,
And
yeah.
he brings up fish.
And it's really interesting that you said that because these lion symbols are very, very interesting. And you'll see actually there's a very famous um, painting from the Egyptian Book of the Dead where it shows Mao, which is a version of um, Ra. And he's in the form of like this lion slash rabbit form. And his paw is on the top of Apophis, which is the serpent. And if you just look up and by the way, and then Mao is holding a knife, the big obsidian blade, and he's cutting the snake. So he's killing Apophis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look up in the sky, and I think I got a slide of this too somewhere. If you look up in the sky, you actually see that it doesn't matter. I'm just going to come back. Leo, if you look at Leo, his paw is on the top of Hydra's head. So you have this exact mirror of these icons of from Egypt and Samaria and biblical and all around the world, where you have this killing of the serpent. And I think we started off this conversation with these two different serpents. And
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about Ophiuchus, you were talking about Hydra, and I just want you to think very simply. You have the sun who travels along its elliptic. So think of the sun as the middle ground, like the border. Above the sun, you have the upper world. All right. And below the sun, you have the lower world. So Hydra is below the sun, so it's this kind of like this water serpent, this serpent that's under in the underworld. So it's given this kind of uh, nasty symbology or an evil symbology, and this is why you have um, the symbol of from Egypt of the solar barge of Ra, for example, and it's traveling through the night sky with Ra, which is the symbol of the sun, and the at the end of the boat, you have Set, who's holding a giant spear, because every single night, Set will protect Ra, the sun, from Apophis, the giant snake. And in the picture, you see this giant snake underneath the boat, and he's killing it so that the sun can rise another day. This is another asterism of the sun passing over Hydra
Mm-hmm.
underneath the boat.
Oh wow. Okay.
So you're seeing all these things like, and then in different times of the year, you'll see very similar things where, actually, I wanted to send this to you. There's a lot of symbolism from Egypt where, and it also goes into biblical times, where you have this person holding the spear, and you have a donkey, and you also have the snake, and the person is spearing the snake from attacking the donkey. All right,
Mm.
so you have Cancer, which is the donkey,
Mm-hmm.
and where does the snake start? Where does Hydra start? It's Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this same type of asterism or iconography of this killing the snake so it protects the donkey somehow. But it's repeated over and over again. So you have these same type of themes, but these are all like astrological symbolism that's been hidden from us. And um, I've been thinking about this for a long time on why this is, because no one really knows this stuff. And when you read the pyramid text, you start to understand why. It's because, and it's the same thing in our world today. is that the pharaohs, for example, or the elite, whatever you want to call them, they had a different protocol. They had a different understanding of the religious texts. And then the normal everyday public was given another understanding of these texts. And it's the same thing with the Bible and other religious texts that you've gone through. I know you've gone through a lot. It shows that there's one teaching for one group of people and another teaching for another group of people. And there are, I think, secret societies that are trying to keep this knowledge alive or teach it. But again, this is a game of broken telephone, as in, as it's passed over thousands and thousands of years, we've kind of lost the original intention of the mysteries or
Mhm.
what it's supposed to be. And now that, just in the past couple hundred years, where we've recovered these ancient texts and translated them and we're mulling over them, um, a lot of people don't see the deeper understanding or the deeper meaning that's in plain sight in these texts. But
Mhm.
if you have that code, like you're always talking about, you have the code or the keys that unlock the Bible, which
Mhm.
is astrology. It's like once you have that code and understand the myths associated with the stars and what happens with the sun as it passes through it, suddenly these texts make sense. They're no longer vague in understanding. Like they literally tell you very specific things. And there's very little people that I know that have caught on to this.
Mhm.
That's why I'm on your show, because you've caught on to this.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. It's always so. So, guys, do you have any questions in the group?
Yeah,
I should have asked you guys to start plugging them.
we're just winging it today, and we're just having a conversation. So whatever pops off, will be good.
Yeah, whatever you guys.
And but what prompted this whole talk today was this. You posted something about Eden and Ophiuchus, and I've been thinking about it since a lot. And first of all, the foot of Ophiuchus is on Scorpius, basically. And what is usually around Scorpius in ancient times was the equinox times. And so you have this figure Ophiuchus who is in the upper world, like I was telling before. He's above the sun,
Mm-hmm.
and so the sun passes around his foot, and you have Scorpio below. We have this kind of opposition. So what's across from Scorpio is Taurus, and so you have basically this kind of spring and autumn equinox opposition. And this is why they talk about the serpent that heals and the serpent that kills. So you have one serpent that brings Orion back to life, and you have one serpent that kills Orion. And it's this kind of dynamic. And remember when um, the sun passes through um, Scorpio, basically the sun hides it. So basically the sun kills the scorpion because it's invisible in the sky when the sun's above it. It's the same thing in Taurus. That's why you have the sacrificing of the bull, or the death of the bull. It's because the sun is now in front of Taurus. You can't see it anymore in the sky. So it's a play on words, and we've just kind of lost this translation. Was Gilgamesh a real giant? Um, I believe that Gilgamesh is the constellation Orion. And because of that, he is known as the giant in the sky. And let me just find this exact quote. And I'll pull it up on screen once I get it. All right, I'm going to pull this up. Astrogenesis update. Hold on 1 second here. Like I said, I have so much things open that I should have closed everything. Jeez. All right, that is not it. Hold on 1 second. Is there anything you want to fill in here while I'm trying to figure this out?
I'm just looking for the questions.
Okay. All right, I found it.
Well, the Gilgamesh thing, supposedly they found his tomb. I don't know if you heard that recently.
I did. But I mean, there wasn't really. No, here we go. Okay, so I got that up. You can share that. All right, so here you have, Orion and the bull, which is Taurus, just so people could see. So here's the slide for the Epic of Gilgamesh, Orion the giant. So in Sumeria, Uruana translates to the light of heaven, was given the asterism of Orion, the giant demigod Gilgamesh. In Greek mythology, Orion was the giant hunter who pursued the seven sisters virgin to protect them from being raped by Orion. Zeus transforms them into the seven doves and places them into the stars as the stars of Pleiades, which sit above constellation Taurus. In medieval Muslim astronomy, Orion is known as Al-Jabr, the giant with the sword. In ancient Aramaic culture, Nephila, which is Nephilim, is referred to as Orion, the great hunter, and the giant and his offspring. All of these ancient stories refer to the constellation Orion as a giant, a hunter, and a pursuer of virgins. And remember, Osiris is also known as the constellation Orion. Okay, so I hope that, so there is evidence that kind of points to these giants as actually being a star myth. And even if you look, and I've been trying to piece this together, and this is more up your alley, Micah. It's the story of David and Goliath.
Right.
Goliath is also a giant, and David slays Goliath with the sling, obviously. But what's really interesting is that you have this kind of same type of theme being played out in other places with the relationship between the constellation Perseus and and Orion. And what is Perseus? Perseus kills Medusa and is holding the head of Medusa. And if you could, I don't know if off the top of my head what that star is called. That is the head in Perseus. He's holding the head. And, Perseus is this kind of hero that kills the giant. And when you look at David and Goliath in a lot of the symbology, you see David then cutting off the head of the giant and holding it. And it's the same star myth of Perseus.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you.
The sculptures of the Sumerians, Babylonians, many deities have purse or a pouch. They're holding on to it.
Yes.
Yeah, you see that in the reptilians and the internet. You see that everywhere too.
Yes, and there's a huge debate about this, and I think it's because of the ancient alien kind of perspective of Zecharia Sitchin. But when you're looking at it, of what the tree of life is back then, and I just had this big debate with someone on Twitter Her name is V, who is an actual, I think she's an archaeologist. She's a world-traveled archaeologist, and she's looking into this as well. And when you see the tree of life, like, you see the Anunnaki and they're standing there with like the pine cone and the water bucket, and
Mhm.
they're basically touching the pine cone to the tree of life. Like literally, they're touching the pine cone to the tree of life. And when you look at the symbol of the tree of life, that symbol is a symbol for a palm tree. All right. So you have a palm tree and you have a pine cone and a water bucket. And what's very interesting is that these are date palm trees. And what they do, and they still do today, is they take the date palm cone, or the seed from the date palm, and they actually go to the date palm tree and touch to pollinate the date palms so that they can have dates. You know, so it may not be a pine cone after all. It may be the seed of the date palm. And there's a lot of other scenes from Babylon and Acadia of them
Well, let me ask you,
showing.
Jason,
Yeah.
have you come across anything? So, um, the I the idea that the apple was the fruit from the Garden of Eden is not met with the scorn that it should be, because it's not. No, they didn't mention that it was an apple. In fact, a lot of people said that it could have been a fig tree, like Buddha was under the fig tree when he got enlightened. What do you think about that?
Um, it's really open to interpretation. And if you're kind of going back to where these stories came from, it really did come out of Mesopotamia. You know, so a lot of the stories do come from this. So if there was a very, the tree of life, which was the date palm or the palm tree, and I don't know how accurate this is, and maybe someone could fact check me here, but I think that um, dates from the palm tree only come from the Middle East. It only comes from like Mesopotamia area. Um, it doesn't come from anywhere else. So why are why are these trees um, only there? And they have to actually. So you have pictures of depictions of people actually going and pollinating these trees. And for me, it was the gift of the gods. The whole symbology of the water bucket and the pine cone or seed from the date palm. What it shows me is the gods bringing life back to the tree of life, which is basically the start of the season. It's when you pollinate, it's the springtime, so that eventually you can harvest those fruits and eat them. And the water bucket is obviously the symbolic of the wet season, which sustains and supports the tree of life. And the pine cone or the date palm seed um, has to do with the element of the air. Because if you go to, let's say, well, you don't even have to go to Mesopotamia. You can go anywhere where there's like coniferous trees and pine cones. Is that when those pine cones open up to pollinate, the sky becomes full of seeds. So the air carries these seeds to pollinate the trees around it. And so you have the element of water, which is sustains the life, and then the element of air, which is the symbol of Anu. Sorry, not the symbol of Enlil. Enlil is the element of air which carries the seed, and this is why it's Enlil in the iconography. And Enlil was also pictured as the bird. So you're looking at these like bird people, and you're like, why is it bird? Well, Enlil is pictured as the bird as well, because he's the element of the air. He flies, just like the seed of life going to the tree.
Wild.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, it's symbolic. A lot of people see it as being literal, as in there were bird people walking around, and these were the ancient gods. Um, and when I first got into this with the whole Zachariah Stitchin leaning ancient alien type point of view, I also thought that. But over the years of studying this, my opinions have completely changed to the symbolic nature of it, because it has to do with the secret teachings that we have been talking about for so long.
I agree. I think that's what I basically did with my work that I've done. I went back 6,000 years and I found all these ancient holy texts and found the astrological pattern in all of them. You know, you're just attacking it from a different angle. This all fits together.
Yes. And this is why we talk. This is why we talk openly into the community, because I really think that there is an original story. All right. There's another gentleman who's very interesting. This is his book. His name is John McHugh. It's a Celestial Code of Scriptures, or Celestial Code of Scripture. And basically what he was finding is that the original stories were the stars. As far back as you can go, they had these very specific stories when they see the stars in the sky, and over millennia and millennia, it was transformed into stories. And that's what is the basis of our scriptures all around the world. So if this is true, which I am heavily leaning that it is true, that there must be an original story, okay, an original scripture that tells the story of the stars, and that is the main teaching that created all these other stories. And obviously they changed due to time and location and culture, but as you have seen in your own research, and I have seen in my research, basically it's the same story with different characters and scenes and things, but it's basically the same story. So
Mhm.
if you start to go back and understand that story, you know, you can pick up, you have the code. You pick up all these scripts that come afterwards, and you're like, oh, this is the theme that relates to Pisces.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and you know, I was showing you the picture earlier of the Seal of Adad, where it shows Enki, which is Pisces Aquarius, and it shows you Ishtar, which is Virgo. Well, where have we heard the story of the fish and the virgin before? Because they're opposing signs.
Right.
So you have it 4,000, not 4,000, 4,500 years ago. You have the story of Enki and Ishtar, which is the virgin and the fish. And then you have in the New Testament the same thing with Bethlehem, the house of bread, the virgin, the holding, taking the wheat to the house of bread. You have the birth of Jesus, who is, referred to as the fish, Pisces. He's born in a manger between, what is it, an ox and a donkey, which is Taurus and Cancer. It's like these are star myths, and
Mhm, mhm.
but you see the same thing going back in this culture, going back in this culture, until it's like you've run out of history. There's no more written text, but it starts at the beginning of written text, which is the introduction of cuneiform in
Mhm.
Mesopotamia. So this is like, um, it's pretty mind blowing, and it's Yom Kippur, right? The holiday of atonement, for
Well,
people.
we're in Libra, of course it has to be.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so we're being judged right now, and we're supposed to fast. I forgot where I was going with this,
It's okay. It's okay.
but happy Yom Kippur. Just
Mhm.
put that out there to everybody. And so yeah, this is like the death as we're going into Libra. This is the atonement of walking into the afterlife of being judged with Osiris. So our heart is being put on the scale. These are very ancient ideas and themes that go to Egypt, and it's carried through into Judaism, even though we will never admit that, right?
We'll never admit that. I mean, you do
Well,
know that. Well,
in the Bible and like the Haggadah and all these things, it's like they kind of, don't talk about Egypt. Egypt is evil. It's
mhm.
so when you say that, we came out of Egypt is what they say,
Well, there's
but
no historical proof of that either, though.
that is correct. That is correct. So again, these are symbolic things of stories that have come before. And I believe that
The misinterpretation of these stories is what is getting the world into the mess that it is. Because the three Abrahamics are fighting over an allegorical book that they take literally. And that will never stop unless we put a stop to it.
this is the biggest problem. And I always go back to the quote by Manly P. Hall, which is basically, and I'm going to just pull up this quote so I say it properly. When the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. And I love this quote so much because, I grew up in religion just like you. I've read the Bible countless times, and, you're taught that this is basically the word of God. You can't really question or do anything about it. And it's taught in a very literal sense. And you have the factions now around the world, the Judeo-Christian, Islamic, because they're all brothers. It's like, this is what people don't understand, is that it's like you have the Jewish people, and from the Jewish people came Christianity, and from Christianity came Islam. It's just,
Well,
if you just
actually, the Muslims would disagree with you on that. The
probably
Muslims would tell you that it goes back to Abraham and Isaac. They said it wasn't Isaac, it was Ishmael, who was the father of, well, I can't call them Semites because they're both Semitic. It's such gaslighting all over the place.
The point is, it comes from a singular source. Okay, a single heritage, which is what you just said. And it evolved into different teachings in different locations. And now we're all fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with the sects in Christianity. They've been fighting each other for hundreds of years too,
mm-hmm.
because of just, we believe something that's, you don't believe, or whatever. But you are really going against the grain, and this is why I love talking to you, because you're out there like every single day pointing this out to people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that in me. I can't just go out and start arguing with people on this, because I'm like, you believe what you want to believe, but it's causing a lot of harm on this planet. But eventually, if there's more people like you and me that are going to the root, so the research is basically starting before the texts were written, and showing the source material, showing what they were actually talking about and their symbolism, and how it's evolved into the works that we know today. That's when the veil is lifted. That's when we understand that there's something much more to this. And again, you can see that separation of there's certain groups of people at a very high level that understand this, but they keep it a secret. And then you have the human population who is kept in control by that information and is basically used. which is very sad, but this is the predicament we've found ourselves in for thousands of years, and nothing has changed.
Mhm.
So I commend you on really going after people straight. I couldn't do that, but it's good to know people that do.
All right. Well, Jason, man, this was a lot of fun. Do you want to just
Yeah.
let everyone know how they can support you, find you, and all that stuff?
Of course. My main website where you can get things directly from me is thecrystalsun.com. But the easiest way of getting my books is from Amazon. It'll come very fast. Uh, the books that we talked about today were Gates of the Anunnaki, which goes into the sacred geometry of the numbering systems and the myths and the astrological myths of the Sumerians, Babylonians, Akkadians. And then this is where it all started, this research, which is Astrogenesis, which starts with going through the pyramid texts and how it branches off into these astrological myths and the cycles of time and the secret code hidden in the symbols. So that's what this book is for. This one's a little heavier than Astrogenesis, but I think they're both like part one, part two, basically.
Okay. All right. And where are you on social media?
I am on a Twitter mostly at Jason_quit. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, but I haven't really added people much on there because I had a lot of people on there, about 20,000 plus, and they just deleted me a couple years ago. So I haven't really built my social media up back on those two platforms. Yeah.
Wow.
So thank you for having me on this live, and thank you for all these questions.
Yeah. So it's been great. So we'll definitely be in touch, and we'll set something up soon. And thank you everybody for being here, and I'll talk to you soon.